Thank
We
you.
are recording now. Sorry about that. All right. So if any of you do happen to have any questions or concerns along the way, please feel free to utilize the Q&A functionality within this Zoom meeting. And one of our top enrollment coordinators, Robin Carter, she's here with us to help answer your questions. We also have Q&A help from Gina Pompadre, one of our clinical support specialists, and Dr. Julie Craig, one of Bicycle Health's top clinicians. If you notice the image to the right here, all you need to do is just select that little Q&A icon listed toward the bottom of your Zoom video, and a Q&A pop-up should appear, which should enable you to type in your questions or comments that you may have. And in case you're wondering, don't worry about it. You do have the option to send your questions in anonymously. So, why are we called Bicycle Health? Well, when our founder was developing our organization, he found a lot of similarities between addiction recovery and riding a bike. You have your uphills, you have your downhills. You can move slow or you can move fast, depending on your choice of speed of pedaling. Many times you start out with training wheels until you feel comfortable riding your bike without them. Sometimes without those training wheels, we fall off the bike, and that's totally okay, right? The goal is to just get back on the bike, keep going, and don't let that fall deter you from riding the bike. Bicycle Health was started about 5 years ago by our founder and CEO, Ankit Gupta. An engineer by training, Ankit wanted to create technology that had impact and meaning, and realized that there was a huge need to help people suffering from addiction. At that time, fentanyl and other opioid addiction were skyrocketing, so the organization decided to focus on treating opioid addiction primarily. After spending, after spending several months connecting with people in recovery and listening to their stories, Ankit began building the Bicycle Health treatment program. Bicycle Health did begin as an in-person treatment center in Redwood City, California in 2019. The first clinic had 8 members and about 150 patients. The clinic was really successful, but to make it easier for patients to access care, the organization decided to start seeing patients via telehealth as well as in person. It quickly became apparent, though, that much of the stigma that came along with addiction evaporated in a telehealth environment, and it became much easier to positively impact the lives of our patients. Telehealth made things like caring for children or an elderly loved one that much easier. And it also made it easier for people to stay employed, seek treatment that fit their work schedules. Travel often impacted treatment, along with privacy concerns. Telehealth, it fixes all of these problems. So what is telehealth? Telehealth is the delivery of healthcare remotely by means of telecommunications technology, meaning telehealth allows a healthcare provider to care for a patient without an in-person office visit. So when COVID-19 hit, Bicycle Health adapted to a telehealth model and never looked back. Maintaining a telehealth treatment model has really been a game changer for our patients. It enables us to provide high quality treatment from anywhere in the country. In just 2 years, Bicycle Health has gone from 8 staff members to just a little over 200 and growing. We've gone from serving patients in just 1 state to being licensed to treat patients in 28 states. And most importantly, we've gone from around 150 patients to just over 18,000. Our current retention rate after 30 days is 75%, compared to the industry average of 69%. Our current retention rate for after 90 days is 59%, compared to the industry average of just 44%. The no-show rate for Bicycle Health patients is 9.5%, compared with 23% as the industry average. And our current age range of our patients goes anywhere from 18 to 77 years of age. Bicycle Health is HIPAA compliant and is one of the only telehealth companies that employ full-time clinicians and on-call teams. In 2022, Bicycle Health was listed as one of Time Magazine's most influential companies. Our mission is to increase access to quality, affordable, convenient, and private opioid use disorder treatment for all. And our vision is to enable everyone with a chronic disease to have a healthy and fulfilling life like we all deserve. So this image that we're looking at, we are currently licensed to treat in 30 of the 50 states. So the green that's showing on this map indicates the states that we are presently active in, and we are working diligently to get the rest of this map completely filled up with green. So let's get into it. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Danny Nieves-Kim, who happens to be one of our fantastic providers here at Bicycle Health. He's going to speak with you all, not just about opioid use disorder, which is sometimes called OUD, but also about how opioids affect the brain, as well as what Suboxone does to the brain. So thank you so much, Dr. Nieves-Kim, and feel free to take it away, my friend.
All right, thank you so much, Kyle. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Danny Nieves-Kim, pronouns he, him, his. I'm a family doctor specializing in addiction medicine, and I've been with Bicycle Health for a little more than a year now. Today, I'm going to share some information about addiction and the brain and the effects of opioids and buprenorphine, otherwise known as the active ingredient in Suboxone. So let's start with some important background. All of us actually have three brains. There's this evolutionary hierarchy up in our heads that helped us as humans to survive. Right here at the bottom, in that orangish brown, is the reptilian brain or the lizard brain, also called the brainstem. This is what controls basic bodily functions: heart rate, temperature, breathing. This is when someone's considered brain dead, even though their heart is beating and they're still breathing. It just means the lowest brain, the lizard brain, is still alive. The second brain is in the middle, the mammalian brain, also called the limbic system. The limbic system deals with fear, pleasure, and also with attachment and connection. This is the part that evolved to allow mammals to work together, to hunt and gather cooperatively, to share with other members of your family or herd, and to care for more vulnerable offspring. And you can see how evolution encouraged this connection, this attachment, by tying it to reward and pleasure in the limbic brain. And of course, the top brain, the cortex. This is the human brain. This is what is most sophisticated. It's what evolved last. And this is what makes us human: the ability to use logic, to plan, to imagine, to be creative, to judge, and have a sense of morality. So the three brains receive information from the inside world, from within our bodies, and from the outside world. The lizard brain is asking, am I safe? The limbic brain, or the feeling brain, asks, am I loved? Or is this pleasurable or painful? And the thinking brain, or the cortex, asks, what do I think of this? What can I learn from this? A faster way to think about all these brains is the three M's. The lizard brain at the bottom is mindless. The human brain at the top is mindful. And what's in the middle brain? The limbic brain. A minefield. Thank you, Kyle. Let's dive into why this is a minefield. So let me, I think it's important to think of this, think about trauma and the brain before jumping into addiction and Suboxone. So childhood trauma is such a big risk factor for developing addiction. And in trauma and addiction, there's actually a shared process in the brain that I'm going to talk about. So let's take, for example, little Paddington the cub, right here in the lower left. Very cute. He's walking home from school. He comes across a kitten sitting on the sidewalk. The kitten meows, so Paddington the cub reaches over to pet it. But suddenly the cat hisses and scratches his little bare paw. In that moment, little Paddington's brain goes into survival mode. His brain has perceived a threat to his safety. And what's actually happening is his limbic brain, The middle brain, remember, sounds an alarm, preparing his body to fight or flee or just freeze. And all systems not crucial to survival are turned off. This means the thinking brain, the cortex, is turned off. Blood and oxygen is diverted to the muscles, adrenaline's pumping, his heart's racing, opens up his lungs, cortisol floods through his body, he can't feel pain from the cat scratch. And when Paddington's trauma response is turned on, he becomes Paddington, the mad slash sad slash scared bear. What does Paddington do now that his stress response has been activated? He quickly turns around and runs home. So now when he gets home, this could play out in a couple different ways. One, he goes home, he tells his parents what happened. They calmly validate his experience. They reassure him, they hug him, check if he's seriously hurt. They fix him maybe a nice bowl of soup at the perfect temperature and put some ice on his paw. This nurturing attentiveness promotes self-regulation and a resilience in Paddington's limbic brain. And with greater resilience, you see that in the bottom curve, he's able to maintain calmness in future encounters with the cat. But say it doesn't play out that way. Maybe he runs home and the first thing he finds is his mom yelling at him for being late to dinner. He tries to tell her what happened, but she says, a kitten couldn't possibly have done that. Stop making excuses. Paddington's dad shouts from the living room, everyone shut up. The Bears are playing the Packers right now. Paddington, quit being a scaredy cat and go to your room. Paddington remains stressed the remainder of the night. His limbic brain has not been regulated. His limbic brain will forever remember this traumatic experience with the kitten. In the future, whenever Paddington encounters a cat again, his limbic system remembers it. He remembers this dangerous kitten from his childhood. So his nervous system has become sensitized to the threat of a cat scratching him, that top curve right there. And as an adult, sometimes he feels stressed when he sees Garfield in the newspaper comic book section or the comic section, or if he's walking down the cereal aisle at the grocery store and he sees Tony the Tiger. For some reason, he gets stressed. But of course, he can't deploy his fight or flight response at the grocery store. Maybe he tries to self-regulate his limbic system with something pleasurable, something sweet, something comforting, like a jar of honey. So let's start talking about addiction. Between the limbic system and the cortex, there's a dopamine reward pathway that runs along a loop. Kind of think of it as a highway with lots of little cars running back and forth between the feeling brain and the thinking brain. And the cars are actually little neurotransmitters called dopamine. Dopamine leads to pleasure, relaxation, and it increases the sense of reward and motivation. And you can see here in this chart, different activities, different substances lead to different amounts of dopamine release, right? For instance, a good meal can boost your dopamine by 50%. Sex can boost your dopamine by 100%. Cocaine can boost your dopamine by 350%. And methamphetamine could actually increase your dopamine by another 1200%. So naturally, because the brain finds this dopamine so rewarding, it starts to change, it starts to rewire. It starts to strengthen the reward system and the limbic system. And if you think of it like a highway with increasing traffic, the state decides to add more lanes because it wants to grow its economy. So they create a super wide 10-lane highway running through just the feeling brain. And to increase how quickly reward is perceived, the thinking brain, the connection between the thinking brain and the feeling brain actually weaken. It's as if the highway was bulldozed. So basically you end up with a much faster and stronger reward circuit that bypasses the thinking brain. Just like in trauma, the limbic system hijacks the thinking brain. So every time Paddington sees a cat meme on his social media feed, he notices he becomes a bit more moody, wonders why everyone else thinks these memes are funny. He thinks they're stupid, and he unknowingly always seems to get a craving for honey, right? And pretty soon, Paddington's craving honey every night. He wants to stop eating it, but he can't seem to stop. How do opioids play into all this? Well, opioids and endorphins, our body's natural opioids, also release dopamine by activating opioid receptors in our body. And therefore, these opioids are very much involved in the dopamine reward pathway. And these opioid receptors are not just in that reward pathway, they're everywhere. They're all over the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord. This is how opioids help relieve pain. They're in the intestines. This is why when people take opioids, they get constipated. They're in the feeling brain, the limbic system. And when those get activated by opioids, you get pleasure, euphoria, relaxation, less anxiety. And of course, when opioid receptors, because opioid receptors are in the brainstem, which control breathing, when there's too much opioid is taken, how an overdose happens and someone stops breathing. When opioids are taken for a prolonged period of time, tolerance develops. Less and less dopamine is released. After long-term use, there really is no more high or euphoria. It only leads to withdrawal, that leads to this worsening mood, and opioid use just brings someone back to a lower baseline. Why is this happening? It's because the opioid receptor has changed, right? One analogy I use often with my patients is it's like an old leather couch whose seat has sunken in because lots of heavy people have been sitting in it. Now there's this deep butt groove in the couch. And in the same way, the opioid receptors in the body have just changed, have become distorted. And guess what? This old leather couch is a grumpy one. It gets upset when the groove is empty, when no one's sitting in the seat. So it throws a fit. When an altered opioid receptor is empty, the body goes into withdrawal. A person who's been using opioids chronically, who stops using, is going to sweat, shake, yawn, sneeze, tear. They'll actually get goosebumps like this cold turkey. And this is actually where opioid withdrawal is actually where the term cold turkey comes from. And they'll feel terrible anxiety, insomnia, even depression. So in opioid addiction, two things are going on. There's an unhappy couch, distorted and altered opioid receptors, and there's a dysregulated limbic system that's hijacked the thinking brain, aka Paddington, the sad, mad, scared bear. Now that we're understanding addiction as a process where the feeling brain is hijacking the thinking brain, maybe we can empathize a little bit more with Paddington and other people struggling with addiction in our lives. Too often, we blame people with opioid addiction for their lack of control, for their poor choices. We shame them. We call them stigmatizing terms like addicts, abusers. We label them as dirty as opposed to clean. And we try to just tell them, stop using drugs. And then we get frustrated and feel betrayed or personally offended when a person continues to use opioids. But here's another analogy. Consider the thinking brain as a bear trainer, like at the circus. And in the past, all of our therapies, our rehab programs have tried to teach the trainer to be more competent, to be better, to more effectively train the bear. But that's not really realistic. How can we expect the trainer to tame a powerful 500-pound bear that's upset and distressed? Try putting a trainer in a cage in between a mad bear and a jar of honey. And then when the trainer gets mauled and the bear gets its honey, we write off the trainer, aka the thinking brain, as weak or lazy or morally deficient. So this kind of feels hopeless. What can we do with an angry bear? What do we do about that unhappy couch? The good news is there's life-saving medication. So opioids commonly used in opioid addiction are all short-acting. They only last in the system for 2 to 8 hours. And I describe them as slippery. Like they don't stick that long to the receptor, but they're very heavyweight. They'll activate the receptor fully. But the good news is that methadone and buprenorphine, the active ingredient in Suboxone, are much longer lasting. They're much stickier. The difference between methadone and buprenorphine is that methadone is super heavy. In scientific terms, it's a full agonist or activator of the opioid receptor. Buprenorphine weighs much less. It's a partial agonist or activator of the opioid receptor. And I'm not going to talk about naltrexone. That would be a whole nother talk. So when methadone or buprenorphine come by and sit on the couch, the opioid receptors are satisfied, right? The couch is happy. And sorry for all the silly analogies, but here you can see Homer Simpson and Maggie Simpson. They have different weights, different levels of pressure on the couch, but the final effect is the same. A person with opioid use disorder who uses methadone or buprenorphine, their couch is now content, no more opioid withdrawal, no more opioid craving. So how do we choose buprenorphine versus methadone? Well, let's review a few different factors. Number one, both block opioids. If Homer and Maggie are both sitting on the couch, they end up defending the couch because they don't want to share. So if a person on buprenorphine, aka Suboxone or methadone, uses another opioid, that opioid will actually not have an effect. It will be unable to activate the opioid receptors. But the difference is that Homer Simpson is a bit lazier. His cardiovascular health isn't as good as Maggie. So after a while, he'll give up. He'll share the couch. He'll even relinquish his seat. So buprenorphine is actually the stronger opioid receptor blocker. The second factor, methadone, remember, is super heavyweight. It's the full activator of the receptor. And, to be honest, on the street, some people do use illicit methadone for pleasure and euphoria, although it's not nearly as rewarding as fentanyl or heroin. And a person with opioid addiction who uses buprenorphine, they will not feel pleasure or euphoria because it's a partial activator. Remember, it is lightweight. It is not pressing down on that couch seat very much. Maggie Simpson doesn't weigh very much. And remember what I said about Homer being a little lazy, getting tired easily? With methadone, it's still possible to use other opioids on top of it and feel those effects. With buprenorphine, it's pretty hard to do that. Maggie Simpson's fierce and persistent. So from an addiction recovery standpoint, one could argue that we're trying to move away from the pattern of coping with the substance. So sometimes I'd argue buprenorphine wins in this category. That being said, it does raise that philosophical question: is it inherently wrong or bad to consume a substance that releases dopamine or produces pleasure? What if it doesn't lead to negative consequences and loss of control? What about caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, cannabis? So just a good book recommendation for folks who might be interested in exploring that philosophical question a little bit more. The third factor, both methadone and buprenorphine have a lot of restrictive rules around it that actually do make it a bit inaccessible for people who need these life-saving medications. But it's fair to say that methadone has way more regulations around it than buprenorphine. And methadone can only be given in certain clinics. There's a lot of zoning restrictions on creating these clinics. But buprenorphine, Suboxone, can be prescribed through telehealth. It can be prescribed in the regular clinic. It can be prescribed in the emergency department. And finally, oh, one more, Kyle. I personally think this is the most important factor here, overdose risk. Remember, there are opioid receptors in the primitive brain, so fully activating opioids can stop breathing. Methadone can lead to overdose and death. With buprenorphine and Suboxone, it's nearly impossible unless it's combined with a lot of other sedating drugs. So not only is buprenorphine life-saving, it really doesn't have the risk of fatal overdose. So let's review the major takeaways from my slides. Addiction is an illness of the feeling brain. The limbic system hijacks the thinking brain. What that means is we need to stop blaming the bear trainer. We need to compassionately soothe Paddington the bear first before we can engage our thinking brain. Opioid addiction also involves opioid receptors that change over time, just like our unhappy couch. And this leads to a really terrible cycle of dosing and withdrawal. And finally, buprenorphine and methadone allow these unhappy opioid receptors to settle down, to recalibrate, so that groove in that couch can gradually diminish. And of course, buprenorphine in Suboxone is life-saving, it's difficult to misuse, it is accessible, and it has near zero overdose risk. And this final quote here, this is basically what every patient says when they come in to seeking care. I don't even enjoy this. I don't get high on this. I'm just using to avoid feeling sick so I can live my life and function. So thank you so much for your attention and time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Nieves-Kim, for that detailed information. It was really educational, and I feel like our society just should be talking about this stuff a lot more often. So thank you so much again. All right, so now I want to bring on one of our top clinicians, Dr. Julie Craig, and one of our clinical support specialists, Gina Bompadre. Dr. Craig is going to speak with us about our clinical model and touch on what Suboxone is and really how it works. And then Gina will then take over, and she will be speaking with you all about what it is like to be an established patient here with Bicycle Health. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Julie Craig. Hi, Julie.
Hello. I am Julie Craig. I'm the Pacific Regional Medical Director over California, Oregon, and Washington. I have been a board-certified addiction medicine physician since 2015 and also board-certified in family medicine. You can go on ahead to the next slide there. Now, very unfortunately for me, Danny did a great job. Dr. Kim did a great job in describing what Suboxone is, how this works. So I'm just going to go over very briefly, kind of a little summary here. So the medication that we use to help stabilize opioid issues is called buprenorphine. The format that we use has another ingredient called naloxone. Naloxone is popularly known as Narcan, and it's only in this formulation to avoid people injecting Suboxone, which can be done under very limited circumstances with the buprenorphine alone. This Suboxone, the main ingredient in buprenorphine, is what's called a partial opioid agonist. That's what Dr. Kim was talking about. It fills the opioid receptors, but it does not activate those receptors. That's why it's a partial opioid. That should stop the cravings, to stop the withdrawals without making somebody high. The advantages of switching from opioids to a medication like buprenorphine are that it's safer. It's very hard to overdose on, like Dr. Kim said. When we see overdoses with buprenorphine, they almost always involve heavy sedatives. So that's going to be alcohol, benzodiazepines like Xanax, barbiturates like Soma, kind of older pain medication. And in those cases, it's still very hard to overdose on. It's rare to see it. It's also long acting, which is one of the key things that Dr. Kim also talked about. Most people can dose buprenorphine once a day, which changes the dynamics in their life from having to constantly find and use and step out from work to use opioids to just taking it once a day like you would a medication like some insulins or Prozac or something like that. You take it in the morning, forget about it, go on about your day. And the third thing is it does not cause tolerance. Tolerance is the need to have more and more opioid over time to get the same effect. So this is a really typical story. This is something that's going to happen in almost anybody who's taking opioids on a daily basis, whether that's from a prescribed source or a street source or anything else, the same thing happens. You start with one Lortab and it works great. One hydrocodone feels great, no problem. Pain's taken care of. If people are taking it recreationally, it does what they want to do. Pretty soon that's not enough anymore. And that's because, in my opinion, the body recognizes the toxicity of opioids from the outside of the body, recognizes that at the end of the day, if you take too much, you stop breathing. So the body quickly adapts, making more opioid receptors, making more enzymes in the liver to crank through that opioid faster. Because buprenorphine is not a full opioid, we don't see that effect. So if somebody's doing well at 16 milligrams a day, 2 of the Suboxone films or tablets, they tend to continue to do well. We don't see people needing 20 milligrams, then 24, then 32, and kind of going through this escalation process that we see with opioids. The main disadvantage, and this is really a tough one, is that it maintains a physical dependence. And this is also true of methadone. If you stop Suboxone suddenly after having been on it for a while, it will not feel good. It will feel like opioid withdrawals because at the end of the day, it is a form of opioid withdrawal. But we use it because of those things above. It's safer, it's long acting, it doesn't cause the tolerance. So the steps in our program at Bicycle Health this is a gross simplification, but the basic steps are induction, maintenance, and tapering. So induction is the transition from an opioid to Suboxone. Now, because buprenorphine, the main ingredient, is a medication that the chemical sits very tightly on the opioid receptor, it will kick out other opioids that might be there. So people have to let those other opioids get out of their system or do some other techniques to be able to make that transition. If somebody just takes buprenorphine on top of opioids, it will kick them into withdrawal and feel quite sick. But we've become very adept at helping them through that process, either by going into withdrawal for some period of time, or like I said, there's some other ways that we help people get through that process safely. We are always, safety conscious first. So if somebody doesn't seem like they're doing well, or they don't seem like they have the capacity to follow complex instructions at home, we may defer them to other care such as detox. We use comfort medication to make sure that if somebody is feeling ill from withdrawals, which can include things like anxiety, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, flu-like feeling, and many, many other symptoms, which sounds rather unpleasant and looks rather unpleasant if you've ever seen it, and feels rather unpleasant if you have ever experienced it. We use comfort medications to help with the nausea and help with the anxiety to get people through that process. We try to take care of everything during business hours, but if somebody has a crisis on the weekend, we have on-call providers to help with that. And usually the on-call providers, the most common thing they get is something's not going well with this induction, and we coach them through it and get them on their way. When somebody's on Suboxone, there's just some tidying up and maintenance issues, making sure the dose is right, making sure that it's dosed to make sure that cravings and withdrawals are under control, but not so much that somebody's feeling sleepy, which is pretty rare with Suboxone, but it can happen. We monitor to make sure that people are not diverting the medication. That's a big concern in terms of regulatory stuff and the DEA, States Board of Pharmacy, Board of Medicine, those kinds of things. So we do in-home drug screens and have people upload live photos through the app of just the drug screen cup. We don't observe or witness drug screens. We don't want to watch people peeing all day, so we don't do that. If we have any concerns about the veracity of the drug screens, we send people to a lab to do a witness screen, or we do a cheek swab, which is in front of a provider to avoid any tampering or changing the results. We treat relapses. We know that relapse is a part of this process. The person who goes straight to Suboxone and moves through that without relapsing is a fairly rare person. We know that's true of all drugs, alcohol, including nicotine, and opioids, of course. So we work through that. And really what we want to get at is what is causing the opioid dependence and what's causing a relapse. So that might be anxiety or depression. It might be genetics. Some people just really like opioids and feel them as uppers that make them social and happy and with elevated mood and energy. Is it because of a pain issue that we need to work through? We are not a pain clinic, but we may suggest, big back issue seems like it really needs to be evaluated by a surgeon, or then kind of move people onto that space. And we take a team-based approach. We have social workers who help with the therapy side of things, and we also manage other medications. If somebody is experiencing depression, we also address that. We don't do a huge broad scope of practice beyond the basics of mental health, like anxiety, depression, PTSD, insomnia, things like that. We don't treat schizophrenia or bipolar disorder in-house, but we do work with people who have those conditions as long as they have an outside provider. At the end of the day, people decide if they want to taper off Suboxone or not. This is not for everybody. We have people who are essentially committed to Suboxone for a lifetime. That's often people with intractable chronic pain issues, or people who have tapered off Suboxone before and found that it worked for a bit and then they relapsed and they endangered their life when they relapsed. But we do help people taper. When I taper people off Suboxone, it is excruciatingly slow. My goal is that people don't feel withdrawals or cravings during a taper, that they go at such a pace that their body adjusts as we go. And that might mean 1/4 milligram a month or slower or faster for some people. And the main thing about Bicycle Health is that all of our services are online in the privacy of the patient's own home, or sometimes people step away from work, get into their car where they have some privacy. Doesn't necessarily have to be at home, but that helps reduce stigma in the sense that they don't have to go into a clinic that has a label over the top of it where everybody knows what happens in that clinic. They don't have to undergo any of those kinds of things. So it helps us to treat people where they're at rather than making them come to us. So just in conclusion, medication-assisted treatment saves lives. It's proven methadone and buprenorphine both are proven to be reducers of alcohol mortality and overdoses. And we make treatment convenient and accessible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie, for that. Really appreciate all that information. So now we have Miss Gina Bompadre, who's going to talk to us about what a patient's care will look like here at Bicycle Health. Take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. Hi, everybody. My name is Gina, like you said, and I am a clinical support specialist in the Northeast region here with Bicycle Health. I have actually been here. I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary, so super excited about that. And I'm also a certified clinical medical assistant and have been in healthcare for 20 years, but we'll get more into that later. Through this program, our patients, you are able to live your lives, maintain employment, get promotions, rebuild relationships. We see it every day. Having this program via telehealth allows you to have your appointment in the comfort of your own home at the days and times that work best for you. So after you've enrolled into the program, you have your first appointment scheduled. You're going to get a link to download the Bicycle Health app. This app is all you need to have your appointments and reach your care team, somebody like me. Behind the scenes, your care team, the clinical support specialist, we are calling your pharmacy to make sure that they have stock in your medication. And our goal is to make the transition into the program as seamless as possible for you. So by locating the medication ahead of time, it prevents a delay in your induction and reduces the time spent going back and forth with your care team. Your care team is not only comprised of medical personnel, again, like myself, and your provider, but also includes a highly innovative tech support and engineering team that's always looking for ways to improve the overall app experience. And in the age of technology, we all know things happen. This highly skilled team is here to help resolve those unforeseen tech issues and get things back on track as quickly as possible. We also have a dedicated financial management team, whether you are self-pay or an insurance patient, to make sure that your billing is accurate and as painless as possible. We do understand things happen. Obviously, life comes up. When you reach out to us in the app, we're able to send requests to the finance team to change things like billing dates, insurance inquiries, for example, and just so many other financial related items that they can help assist with. Now, in the beginning, we talked about that beginning MAT, medicated assisted treatment. It's not only about the medication. It also involves treating the whole person, and we understand that, and that includes your mental health. Because of this, you also have access to a one-on-one licensed therapist, group therapy, peer-led support groups, and care coordination. Some of us have been where you are, and some of us are on the outside looking in. If you're not comfortable at first talking with a therapist one-on-one, go to a support group or a group therapy session and just listen. There are many different groups for all walks of life, every day of the week, all hours of the day. Every single person in there has their own story, and one just might resonate with you. Maybe your story can help them. At least try one. You might find it very helpful. Now I'll pass it on over to Kyle again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gina. Appreciate all of that. So our final speaker of the evening is going to be the talented Robin Carter. Robin is going to go over Bicycle Health's enrollment process with you and talk about how easy it is to join the Bicycle Health program. Thanks, Robin. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Kyle. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Carter. I'm one of the enrollment coordinators here at Bicycle Health. And I just want to go over Bicycle Health's enrollment process with you all. I'll go over the different options we have to enroll into our program, and then I'll go over the additional steps needed to become an established Bicycle Health patient. So to start, we have multiple ways you can choose from to enroll into our program. From our website, you can actually find a chat functionality that will connect you with one of our enrollment coordinators, and they'll walk you through the entire process. Also, from our website, you have the ability to go on and schedule the perfect date and time for one of our enrollment coordinators to reach out to you, or you can choose to enroll through our self-service option, which would involve you filling out an intake on your own and having an enrollment coordinator reach out to you once it's been completed. You can also call straight into our phone lines. Once you connect yourself with an enrollment coordinator, the coordinator will introduce themselves and go over program information as well as answer any questions that you might have. They will speak with you about our $199 monthly rate, which covers all doctor's visits for that particular month, access to online support groups, as well as access to a care team and all of your urine drug screening kits. Once questions are answered, the enrollment coordinator will go through about a 10 to 15-minute health questionnaire with you. This questionnaire will help us gather basic information on you to determine if Bicycle Health is going to be a good fit for you and if you're going to be a good fit for Bicycle Health. Of course, all information gathered will be kept completely confidential. During the questionnaire, the coordinator will also go over billing options with you, such as if you have insurance or if you're going to be self-pay. We are able to accept many commercial insurances, and in some states, we're able to accept Medicaid and Medicare. Once the questionnaire is completed, the enrollment coordinator will electronically send you the paperwork via a text or email that will need to be filled out. These are just standard forms that you would fill out when you go to any kind of doctor's office. There's a consent form, a financial agreement, as well as a couple of HIPAA forms that you'll need to fill out as well. You'll also upload a photo of your ID, and if you're paying for treatment with insurance, you'll also upload an image of your insurance card as well. At the time we receive your completed paperwork, we can then get your appointment scheduled. We'll first book your initial appointment. This appointment is going to be an hour-long slot, so you do want to keep that in mind whenever we're getting you scheduled. After we book your initial appointment, we'll then book your 20-minute follow-up appointment. And this appointment is simply so that your provider can check in on you, see how you're doing, see how you're feeling, things like that. Your follow-up appointment will be scheduled anywhere between 2 to 7 days from your initial appointment. Now that your appointments have been scheduled, your paperwork will go into processing. Our enrollment team will assist you through the registration process and ensure that everything is set up for your first appointment. Once our team has finished processing all paperwork, they'll go ahead and send you the Bicycle Health app to download onto your phone. And the last thing you'll need to do is just wait for your appointment's time and date.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going over all of that, Robin. I mean, we at Bicycle Health, we certainly do our best to make joining our program as easy and seamlessly as possible. And thanks for taking the time to go over that with everyone. Really appreciate it. All right, so before we start taking questions from you all, we would like to take the next few minutes just to show you a really brief demonstration of our Bicycle Health app, so you can see its functionalities, its simplicity, and just how easy it is to navigate. So I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Bicycle Health app. The first tab is the home screen. It shows me everything I need to know about what's coming up with my treatment. I can see my upcoming appointments as well as any clinical tasks that have been assigned to me by my provider. We'll talk more about clinical tasks in the second part of this video. In the Appointments tab, I can see all past and upcoming appointments. Throughout the Bicycle Health app, I can contact my provider or a member of the Bicycle Health admin team anytime by tapping the chat button in the bottom right corner. In-app chat is organized into channels, so I can direct my question to the most appropriate team. In the Meds tab, I can find up-to-date info on my current prescriptions and preferred pharmacies. Under the Resources tab, I can access my account information and settings as well as information and tools. I have an appointment coming up, so I'm going to test out my microphone and camera. Looks good. Now I'm just going to make sure all my app permissions are set up properly. If I have any questions, I can open up the FAQ section and browse through to learn more about different parts of bicycle health treatment. Finally, I can update my payment information and confirm that all my contact info is correct. At this point, I can join the video call from my appointment. I can join the video call up to 30 minutes before my appointment is scheduled to start. If, for some reason, I get disconnected from the video call and I want to rejoin, I can do that by tapping the Rejoin Appointment button. During my visit, my doctor told me about support groups that are hosted by Bicycle Health, recovery, coaches, and therapists. I can access those support groups from the home screen as well. If I scroll down, I can see a listing of available support groups and any of the ones that I might have signed up for. Support groups are group video calls that happen on set days and times. I can browse through the list on the home screen and find support groups that are most convenient for me. If I join them, I'll receive reminders when they're about to start. All I have to do to jump in one is open up my home screen and hit the Join Video Call button. When I join a support group, I know I'm going to be joining a video call with other peers who are also going through recovery. The Bicycle Health app lets me set my privacy settings to choose how much of my full name, if any, I want to display to other peers in that support group.
Great. All right, so hope you all enjoyed that and learned a little bit about our app and how it works. We now just want to spend the last few moments being able to answer any questions that any of you may have. So again, if you do have any questions, please post them in the chat using that Q&A function, and our team will do our best to provide you with all the answers that you need. So go right ahead, Robin.
Alrighty, so our first question Is the support group on Zoom? How do I know my information is protected? So yes, the support groups are on Zoom. They're held through the app, and you can definitely remain anonymous in the support groups. That way your information is protected. Great question. Alrighty, so we have another question. How long will it take to get my first appointment with Bicycle Health? So depending on provider availability, our coordinators will work with you to get an appointment, usually within 24 to 72 hours. Alrighty, so another question. Dr. Danny Nieves-Kim or maybe Dr. Julie Craig can answer this one, but do I have to be in withdrawal before my first appointment?
I can answer that. Please don't be in withdrawal during your first appointment. It's not necessary. When people are in withdrawal at that first appointment and we're trying to go over a lot of information, trying to delve into medical history, mental health history, opioid history, it's hard for us and hard for the patient when somebody's in withdrawal. I mentioned the process of going through all that. We manage that quite carefully. If somebody comes to us in withdrawal, it's fine. We'll work with them the best we can at that point. So it's not like we can't see you at that point. But we do, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but we do two different kinds of inductions. So the old style is just go into withdrawal, tough it out for a while. And in terms of fentanyl, it can be up to 72 hours of toughing it out. And that's a pretty miserable 72 hours. And that's necessary to go through that process. We also do what's called microdosing inductions, which is a little bit different. It's a little bit controversial, and you'll see why in just a second, where you stay on your opioid for 7 days. And in that 7 days, you start incredibly small doses of Suboxone, like 0.5 milligram at a time the first day, and then it doubles the second day, and then it doubles again the third day until 7 days when it kind of just takes over for the opioid. People who are going through that do not have to go into withdrawal. They're able to kind of seamlessly move through that, just sort of letting the opioid fade out over those 7 days. Of course, the controversial part there is who gives you the opioids for those 7 days? And the answer is legally in the United States, we cannot. So if somebody's on, say, illicit fentanyl, they would be staying on illicit fentanyl for about 7 days as we slowly build up this Suboxone. And to be quite frank, my experience is it is very hard to get people through a fentanyl withdrawal for 2 to 3 days to get them started on Suboxone. So I mostly do microdosing inductions. So that person does not need to go into withdrawal at all. It is to their disadvantage to go into withdrawal. Now we want people to be safe. So if somebody has decided to stop and they have cut off their dealer and thrown away their burn phone and really do not want to re-engage with that world, that's fine. And we'll meet them where they're at if they're in withdrawal. But we discourage people from showing up to the first visit in withdrawal.
There was also another question that came in about what if I need to change my pharmacy if my pharmacy doesn't have my medication? Usually what happens with any kind of pharmacy questions, that's what the care team is for in your app. You can go into one of the chat channels, preferably the pharmacy chat channel, and send us a message and let us know that you're having an issue picking up your medication. The more details, the better, obviously, so we know kind of where to take it from there, but we will contact your pharmacy, see what the issue is. If we need to find a new pharmacy that has medication, then we will check stock at other pharmacies that are close to you. If your medication, if your insurance actually requires a prior authorization, we can start those for you. we can send discount coupons. There's some pharmacies that do accept those for this particular medication. If you happen to be self-pay, or maybe if the out-of-pocket is, copay is too much on your insurance, we can set that up for you also. So any pharmacy related questions, just send us through the app in the pharmacy chat and we will get it taken care of. There was also another question that came in: how many appointments on average will my doctor need to see me per month? This is actually per client provider situation. Typically, when a new patient comes in, you will be seen sometimes once a week, sometimes every couple of weeks when you first get in, depending on what your situation was when you came in. And then once you're stable on the medication and your provider, feels that you're stable, then we can go to like a monthly. But I think maybe one of the other providers that are on here, they have a little more insight into that.
I can step into that question. So we are both patient-centered and centered on regulations that drive our practice. So we want to make sure that patients are being treated at the center of all this. We're also beholden to state laws and things like that. So if somebody's coming in, they're just coming on to Suboxone for the first time, or they're coming from a complex transition, like they've been on something like fentanyl, which is a little harder transition. Sometimes we see people up to once a day. I've done that for a few days to walk somebody through a really complex transition. That's more supportive than anything else. That's not something that we require. But essentially, we see people weekly until we get a drug screen back, and then we go to every other week. And I think I'm the picky exception. After the second drug screen, I see people at the 3-week mark, and then go to every 4 weeks, as long as people are stable. If somebody's struggling with mental health issues, if they're okay on the Suboxone, but they're just not sleeping, we may see them more frequently. But the driver from the regulatory side is we have to get drug screens in order to be able to give controlled substances over telemedicine. The driver on the patient side is, how's the person doing? Are they feeling stable? Did we find the right dose? Are they out of the withdrawals and cravings, or are they still struggling? In which case we see people more frequently.
I just saw another question asking about the app, downloading the app on the laptop. So we are telemedicine, and this is an actual app. So it does have to be downloaded onto a device that supports apps. Laptops do not, but because it is an app, an iPad, a tablet, cell phone, honestly, is the best. And because this is how you communicate with your provider, with your visits, seems to be a little more private also. So it cannot be downloaded, excuse me, it cannot be downloaded to a laptop, but an iPad, a tablet, but the best solution is the cell phone.
All righty, folks. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Gina, for taking the time to answer those questions. That was a really big help and great information. Thank you. Well, everyone, our time has come to end our open house. So if you do have any further questions, you can actually send all of your inquiries to openhouse@bicyclehealth.com. Again, that's openhouse@bicyclehealth.com, and we will respond back to you. And if you're interested in enrolling into our program, or if you happen to know anyone that would be interested in enrolling into our program, you can also call us at 844-943-2514. And just to say that again, that's 844-943-2514. You can also visit our website, bicyclehealth.com, where you can review the other enrollment options that Robin was kind enough to speak about a little bit ago, including our chat enrollment. I do want to take the time just to thank you all so much for taking the time to learn more about Bicycle Health and what we're all about. I would also like to thank everybody involved that assisted with putting this event together. Thank you all so much for all the hard work that you've done and dedicated to put this on. So I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your evening. Be safe, and thank you again for your time. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.